Oh, let's talk about it. What are we doing today, Cameron?
We are going to be going over a little bit of Daniel 3.
Ooh. And in Daniel 3, we have Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And
Big players in Daniel 3.
yep, the three amigos
Yeah.
and King
Got,
Nebuchadnezzar and his
oh,
very angry self. All the time he's angry, it seems like.
he's a very angry man.
Him angry. So, I mean, we can touch briefly on what's happened in Daniel 2. We're going to be reading Daniel 3. But in Daniel 2, so what goes down? King Nebuchadnezzar has this dream. He doesn't understand it. So he tries to get together all the magicians and astrologists,
Magicians, enchanters, sorcerers, and astrologers.
and uh, and he tries to get them to not only interpret his dream, but he wants them to like tell him what he dreamed.
Yeah. He doesn't want to tell them the dream. He literally goes, "No, you tell me what my dream was, and then tell me what it was about."
Yeah, and obviously they can't,
Yeah.
and so he gets mad, and he recurring theme, and he decides, oh, I'm gonna put an order out to kill all the wise men in Babylon because these guys couldn't tell me what I saw when I was asleep. And Daniel
Well,
hears about this. Go
not
ahead.
only that, but he's like, "You guys are conspiring against me to tell me wicked things."
I'm sorry. It's funny to me because it makes very little rational sense.
Yeah, he's a very angry king.
Him's angry, and so Daniel gets wind of this. They come to him, getting ready to kill him, and Daniel's like, "Well, hold on a minute. Let me pray about it." He prays about it, and God gives him the whole vision, right? And so then he goes to the king, and he tells the king exactly what he dreamt and exactly what it
Well,
means.
we also got to give their flowers to Daniel's friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, because they prayed as well.
Yes, they did. And when two or more are gathered,
There you go.
and
Daniel
so
knew what
uh,
it was up.
and so the king decides to go. Oh, okay. Well, good job, Daniel. Here's a bunch of rewards and a province, and I'll make your three amigos, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, administrators over the province of Babylon, and Daniel gets to remain in the royal court. So you would think after this experience that Nebuchadnezzar would kind of have this figured out by now.
Well, and the more I think about it, it's almost like he just considers himself to be near God at this point.
Yeah,
Like,
he's
because
got this God King complex going on.
yeah, because he acknowledges God, and he acknowledges to Daniel that your God must be the King of God, like the King of Kings.
Yeah,
Um, and so he acknowledges that there is God, but he also wants them to worship him. So he definitely has some kind of God King thing going on.
yeah. And then so we see coming into chapter 3 of Daniel that he gets this statue built. I assume of him that's 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide, which is about 90 feet by 9 foot ish, which is just massive. I mean, that's a lot of gold.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I mean, we see this time and time again in the Bible. God is not a huge fan of golden effigies, I guess we'll just say.
Yeah. You know that calf.
You know that calf. And so, yeah, the image of gold in the blazing furnace, Daniel chapter 3. As usual, we'll read through it and kind of pepper in some points and have a little bit of discussion afterwards. And, I'm sure Cameron and I will learn something, and I hope you all do as well. So,
Yeah.
without any further ado, let's get after it. You want to lead it off, Cam?
Yeah, I'll take it. So King Nebuchadnezzar made an image of gold, 60 cubits high and 6 cubits wide. So again, we said that's what, 90 feet by 9 feet?
Yeah, or 27 meters high and like 2.73 meters wide, something like that. It's massive.
Yeah. Big old image of gold. And
Yep.
set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. He then summoned the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, and magistrates, and all other provincial officials to come to the dedication of the image he had set up. So the satraps, prefects, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the other provincial officials assembled for the dedication of the image that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up, and they stood before it. Then the herald loudly proclaimed, "Nations and peoples of every language, this is what you are commanded to do. As soon as you hear the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the image of God, of
Of
gold,
gold.
not God, gold, that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Whoever does not fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace."
That's pretty harsh right there. It's very much a do as I say or be beheaded kind of attitude that we see going on here.
And something that didn't really stand out to me the first time that I read through this, but I'm kind of noticing now. They're like, anytime you hear music, you get down and you worship this thing. Because they're like, I don't care if it's the flute, the horn, the zither, any kind of music, you do it, or you're going in the furnace.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is pretty wild. So, chapter 7. Therefore, as soon as they heard the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, and all kinds of music, all the nations and peoples of every language fell down and worshipped the image of gold that King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. At this time, some astrologers came forward and denounced the Jews. They said to King Nebuchadnezzar, "May the king live forever. Your Majesty has issued a decree that everyone who hears the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music must fall down and worship the image of gold." Lost your camera there for a second.
Oh, there we go.
And that whoever does not fall down and worship will be thrown into a blazing furnace. But there are some Jews whom you have set over the affairs in the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the three amigos, who pay no attention to you, your Majesty. They neither serve your gods nor worship the image of gold you have set up. Furious. Go ahead.
I was saying, here it comes.
Yeah. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipe, and all kinds of music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I made, Very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hand?
This next part is such a baller response.
Yeah. Take it.
Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. We are thrown into the blazing furnace. The God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you set up.
So something I want to touch on this, because you are right. What a powerful trust in the Lord.
Right?
They were so persuaded in their faith of God that they're basically like, God can do this, but even if he doesn't, I will not bow. And that's something we can apply to our lives. Like, God can take my cancer, but even if he doesn't, I will not bow. You know, God can fix my marriage, but even if he doesn't, I will not bow. You know, God can make me prosperous, but even if he doesn't, I will not bow. That is true persuasion in the faith of the Lord. Is, you know, even if you do not do what I ask, I will not bow. You know, and that kind of goes back to the last conversation we had about like faith in just in having authentic faith.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you know, just faith in the will of God. Because if he doesn't deliver, there's a reason. And he does deliver always. It just may not be the way that you see it, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, it's not always from your perception what you think. What you think is prosperous for you in the eyes of the Lord is not always what is truly prosperous for you.
Exactly. Exactly. And then so verse 19, then Nebuchadnezzar was furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and his attitude towards them changed. He ordered the furnace heated 7 times hotter than usual, and commanded some of the strongest soldiers in his army to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and throw them into the blazing furnace. So these men, wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes, were bound and thrown into the blazing furnace. Now the king's command was so urgent and the furnace so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. Give me something about that, Cameron.
Yeah, I wanna talk a little bit about that because to me, what really stands out there is in his rage, this man just lost some of his strongest soldiers, some of his best people, just because he was so mad that he couldn't even think straight and was like, turn it all the way up and just get him in there. You just got to be careful with rage in your life. You got to be careful with that toxic anger within you, and you can't allow yourself to be your own worst enemy.
Yeah. Well, and we see that in Daniel chapter 2 as well, you know, before this. Like, he gives this ridiculous request that no, you know, mortal without you know, a miracle of God can achieve. Like, I want you to tell me what I was thinking when I was asleep, and then I want you to explain it to me. I'm not going to tell you what my dream was. You have to tell me. And nobody was able to do it. In fact, the magicians, the sorcerers, the astrologers all said, we can't do this. No one can do this. And so his response was to order the execution of all of the wise men in Babylon, which only really serves to damage his kingdom, right?
Yeah.
And so, that seems to be one of the biggest things, aside from what we learn about God and God's power and faith in him through this passage. That's one of the things we can draw from Nebuchadnezzar's actions is rage will blind you in such a way that like you just make bad decisions. Like,
Hmm.
like there's just, you don't act rationally. So we're on verse 22. Actually, no, we're on verse 24. Haha. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, "Weren't there 3 men that we tied up and threw into the fire?" They replied, "Certainly, your majesty." He said, "Look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of the gods." Ooh. So let's talk about that for a second. What happened when
Right.
they got thrown into the fire? What happened when they fell into the fire?
Uh, well, first of all, they ain't burn. Most important thing right there.
Yeah.
They did not burn it, especially with it being 7 times hotter than it was. Um, but then crazy thing, all their bindings and stuff come off. And they're able to just stand there, free in the fire. And then guy number 4 shows up. Player number 4 comes in from stage left, and the way that I'm interpreting it is it's it's either an angel or it's Jesus, and I'm not sure which one because they do say it looks like the Son of God or a son of the God.
Yeah.
So I think that part is a little bit up to interpretation, but either way, what a powerful thing to have happen for you.
Yeah. And I think when we finish this passage, we'll go back and touch on some of what that can mean in our life.
Yeah. Oh, hang on. Hey.
All right. So verse 26. You want to take us off?
Yeah, let's go ahead and pick back up on that. So Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening of the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was a hair of their heads singed. Their robes weren't even scorched. They didn't even smell like fire. There wasn't even a scent of smoke on them.
That's so crazy.
Right? They came out and basically were like, "So when is the hard part?"
Yeah. They're like, "Where was that? Is that it?"
Right? That's wild to me.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Well,
And
and talk
Nebuchadnezzar
about
said,
talk
"Oh, go
about
ahead."
divine protection as well. Like the power of either the angel that God sent or Jesus, right? Was such that they didn't even carry the smell of smoke. So the smoke didn't even touch them. And
Mm-hmm.
think about their like supernatural protection. Their bindings were burned off, but none of their hair was even singed.
Yeah. No, it's and then just the funniest part to me is when Nebuchadnezzar literally just like, wait a minute, didn't I just throw 3 people in the fire? Why do I see 4?
Yeah. And everybody's like, oh, I don't know.
right? I don't know. Call him. Get him out of here.
Yeah, get him out of there. Let's figure out what just happened. So then,
Oh
verse
man.
28, Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and defied the king's command and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own. Therefore, I decree that the people of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be cut into pieces and their houses be turned into pile of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. And that wraps up that
Nebuchadnezzar.
part. Also, that threat,
Yeah, he likes that threat.
he says it a lot. This is not the first time that Nebuchadnezzar said, cut them into pieces and turn their houses into piles of rubble.
No.
I kind of imagine him saying it kind of passively, sitting on the throne, just like, and cut them to pieces and turn their houses into piles of rubble. And you know the drill.
He's done it just so many times. He's bored with it now.
Yeah. And then, so, Nebuchadnezzar has another dream of a tree in chapter 4, and maybe that's something we'll touch on another day because Daniel comes back to interpret that as well. Because Daniel is now part of the royal court, right? So, some things we can learn, right?
Couple things. We touched on a couple, but we got a couple more. I'm sure we can suss out.
Oh, yeah. And we can definitely expand on some of those. So, again, they were so persuaded by their faith in God, right? Let's talk about that. We talked about it a little bit in our video about Paul and Silas. And this is obviously something that is testified on so many times throughout the Bible. But it's the point I really want to stress is it's not just saying my God can do anything. It's also saying that even if he doesn't, right? Almost especially if he doesn't, I will not bow. And I think that's something that is so important in walking in faith and walking a righteous path is understanding that you're not going to get what you want all the time, and that's not the point. Like,
Yep. 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 That's just not how it works.
exactly. And another really good point is like the pressure is going to come. Let's look at the heat of the furnace metaphorically for a second, or philosophically for a second. Metasophically for a second. What do we do, Cameron, when things heat up in our lives? What do we want to do, and what are we supposed to do?
Well, we want a lot of the time to give up and look for an easier path, try to find a way out of it. But a lot of the times, what we should do and what we need to be doing is just keeping the faith and understanding that. And another point that we're going to get to about it is a lot of the time there's something on the other side of that fire. And you want to get there.
Yeah. When the devil turns up the heat, so does God.
There you go.
A quote, and I'm paraphrasing this, but a quote that I saw not too long ago in a Facebook reel is, think of yourself as a sword. A sword has to be put in the fire, and it has to be hammered on and hammered on and hammered on, taken out of the fire and then placed back in the fire and hammered on some more and hammered on. And that process goes on over and over and over again before you really become a sword. right? And
Mhm.
life is a lot like that. And so even if it feels like, the enemy, the badness, the world, whatever it is turning up the heat on you, you know, if you got to look at it like the forge, it's going to strengthen you. It's going to make you harder. It's going to turn you from, raw iron to solid steel, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, a big a,
Pre.
a big thing about this that these three gentlemen really lived out is found in Isaiah 43, and I'm going to turn to it real quick. But
Oh yeah, the promise.
it's God's promise in the fire, and this is part of the Song of Songs. Um, Isaiah 43. But now this is what the Lord says: He who created you, Jacob, he who formed you, Israel. Do not fear, for I have redeemed you. I have summoned you by name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you pass through the rivers, they will not sweep over you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. The flames will not set you ablaze. And we see the faith in that promise so quickly after here in Daniel chapter 3. And I think that's something that we all need to kind of keep in our hearts, especially nowadays. I mean, look at the world that we live in right now. Like everywhere you look, there's just issue.
Mhm.
We're all so divided. We're all struggling so hard. A lot of people are struggling just to survive these days, myself included. I mean, there is nobody, I feel, in the general population that's having an easy time right now.
Yeah. Gen Pop.
Yeah, Gen Pop. Hey, we're not talking about Paul and Silas anymore. You know, um, I think that promise in the fire, and honestly, a lot of the book of Isaiah is so important right now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you could back that out and expand that and just say a lot of the different books throughout the entire Bible are important right now.
You could back that out even further and say the entire Bible is so very important right now.
Yeah.
And I think it always is. I feel like we're living in a world now where so many people feel kind of directionless. You know what I mean? Like they're just like, here, stare into the nightmare rectangle and watch the world collapse in real time.
Yeah.
And this is just kind of more of a general note than just on Daniel chapter 3, but like I think people need this now more than ever. In a
Yeah.
sense. It's so difficult to have faith that God will walk you through the waters and God will walk you through the fire. Um, I think that's almost more difficult to have faith in now with the insecurity of the world as a whole, than it used to be. I mean, there's never been such a thing as true security in life. But we're kind of in a time now where you can do everything quote unquote right, and still not get where you may think you need to be.
Yeah. Well, I think we can definitely tie that in with Daniel 3 and your point about how it's important now to have that faith more than ever. Um, the same as with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego when they're about to be thrown into the furnace. Like it's the same thing. Now it's just the world. and you got to keep that faith.
Well, and you notice
It's really
something.
all you can do.
They didn't pray for deliverance.
No, they didn't ask to be taken out of the situation. Even they were just like, "Look, we believe you can and will save us, but even if you don't, we still worship you. We still got faith in you."
Yeah, we're
Which
not
just
going to bow.
ties back into what we were talking about last time, where it's like it's not always what you think your path needs to be.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's different than what you have an understanding of with your perspective. And all that really matters, just like with what you were saying in the garden video, is his will be done.
Yeah. And the fact that their faith was so strong, they didn't even ask. Like, there
Yeah.
wasn't even a prayer where they were like, we really don't want to be thrown into the furnace, but if we are, your will be done. Like, they just kind of looked at Nebuchadnezzar and were like, hey, do it, dude. Just do it.
And
Like, whatever happens, happens. Either way, I'm not bowing to your statue. Like, it's just not happening. So, get after it, bruh. You know?
mhm.
And God saw that and was like, go on down there and help them.
All right, let's save these boys.
Let's save these boys. Another good point is, and we touched on it a little bit, but it's just the protection in the fire. And this is
Hmm.
kind of a two-parter. Like, their chains, their bindings burned off. And that's it. That's it. That's all that got touched. Jesus or an angel, again, we don't really get clarification on that. But,
Well,
walked around in the fire with them.
well, you got to also keep in mind where in the Bible this is happening.
Yeah.
So I think it's up to interpretation, taking the entire Bible into account that it could be Jesus. But it's not like they would have said it in Daniel 3.
Yeah, exactly. The only thing that I'm really taking that interpretation off of is verse 25 when he says, look, I see four men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the fourth looks like a son of the gods.
Yeah.
You know. So, but like their chains, their bindings get burned off. This angel's walking around with them like they're just having a stroll, in this fire. But they come out and they don't even smell like smoke. They were not touched. And from what we can tell, they didn't even feel heat.
Yeah.
They-
No, they seem to be thoroughly chilling.
yeah. Like they could have just like busted out and had a picnic in there.
Right?
And what powerful protection, like
Roasting
no
marshmallows.
earthly force, marshmallows. No earthly force can harm me. Level of protection.
Yeah. No, it's wild.
And part of what that leads me into is here at the end of chapter 3 we see when they came out, the king promoted them in the province of Babylon. And so sometimes our miracle, our growth, our promotion in life is to be found in the fire. And that's kind of what we were talking about before. A sword has to go through the forge over and over and over and over again to really become a sword.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how life works. Nobody ever gets anywhere just chilling. Very few people get anywhere by just chilling. You have to have the faith and be willing to just step into the fire. and know that what awaits you on the other side is either going to be your personal or spiritual transformation, or it's going to be salvation. You know, I bet their lack of concern was really due to, they were like, well, that furnace is really hot.
Right.
And so if God doesn't do anything to stop us from it, and that's his will, okay, we're not going to be in there very long.
Right.
And we're going to wake up in heaven. And so I'm good. You good? I'm good.
Right. Let's go in and see what happens.
Yeah. I'm not going to fight this. I'm not going to argue for it. I'm not even going to pray over it. I'm just
Yeah.
going to have faith that my demonstration, God will see, that my demonstration of faith, I'm not going to bow down, even in the face of a furnace that's 7 times hotter than it ever is.
Well, and I think that's what's powerful there, especially with them not having prayed before being thrown in the fire, is, well, I mean, when you've got that strong faith and that strong relationship with God that you've built up through time, you don't necessarily need to pray for your miracle when you need it.
No,
Sometimes he just gives it to you.
God's just got your back.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes back to one of the recurring themes that we're starting to see, you know, on this channel, is genuine faith. You know, and that's really the key to having a healthy relationship and walking with God, and walking with Jesus, is if your faith is true, if your heart is true, you know, consider the ravens, right? They know not where their next meal is going to come from, what clothes they're going to wear. They don't care. They just know it's there, right? And that's really what it is. It's knowing that God is going to provide. Obviously, you have to work in life. Obviously, you have to put forth the effort, but there's no need to worry. You know, if you have genuine faith, if your faith is authentic, you won't worry. You know, you might be disheartened. I'm certain we've all been stressed out, and I can almost guarantee you they weren't standing in front of that furnace not a little bit shook.
Right. Did you lose
Camera
me again?
popped off. There you go.
There we go. Yeah, no, there was at least a small part of them though that was like, it was kind of hot though.
Yeah. But I don't think, and we don't see anywhere in here where they didn't doubt, right? They never had
No.
any doubt. But I can imagine you're standing in front of that furnace. He's going, no, hotter, no, hotter, hotter, hotter. You know what I mean? And they're sitting there and they're like, "Ugh." I mean, look, even if, you know, he doesn't deliver us from this, we're still not going to bow. So just do it. Honestly, in my opinion, I would have been glad it was hotter because, you know, it's quicker.
Yeah, for real. And I think it's interesting to show that, like, sometimes the armor of God will give you protection in a very literal sense. But sometimes it's also just protection for your heart and for your soul. Because I mean that's what really matters at the end of the day is your soul.
Yeah.
Um, because no earthly weapon forged can damage your soul.
Yeah.
So no matter what is thrown at us throughout life, no matter what sickness or injury or anything like that is thrown at us, As long as you have that faith and you're saved, you will be in the kingdom of God.
Yeah. And I think it's that knowledge. I was going to say that like reassurance, that promise, but I think it's that knowledge that allowed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to kind of just go, all right,
Yeah,
what you do to me on this earthly plane has no effect on my eternity.
exactly.
We're on this planet for a finite period of time. We exist eternally as a soul. And when we get to heaven or we get to hell, and this is something I want to stress, and this is kind of goes beyond just Daniel chapter 3. The fall to hell is so short. I mean, it's right there,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that climb to heaven is a long, skinny road. And knowing
Well,
that,
I don't know if I would agree with that. I think it's more of an impossible climb unless you have Jesus as your Sherpa.
yeah, yeah, that's a better way to look at it. It's one of those things like the Bible can teach us that just based on humanity, just based on our earthly selves, we are of this place, right? We are not heavenly bodies. It's Christ's sacrifice that opens the path, right, for who we are now to be able to go to heaven, to join him.
Well, his blood washed our sins.
Exactly. And so we see that it's the knowledge, and help me out with this one, but it's the knowledge that through real faith and true acknowledgement of that sacrifice, of the creation, of divinity in a holy sense, as well as of the sinfulness of life here on earth. It's the understanding of all of those moving pieces that allows us to identify the path that Jesus laid out for us through his sacrifice, through his blood cleansing our sins clean, and giving us an opportunity to seek salvation. Right?
Yeah.
Like, you have to acknowledge all parts, I guess, is what I'm trying to get to. And that kind of makes it hard. Like, you see a lot of people these days that approach everything from a holier than thou standpoint. And
Mm-hmm.
a lot of those people, I bet you, have not sat down and truly prayed for forgiveness in so long. I meet them all the time.
Yeah.
They think they've got this heaven thing figured out, when truthfully, we as men, we as humans, we as man are not inherently worthy. It's that sacrifice of the Lamb. It's that sacrifice of the Son of God that gives us the opportunity to be worthy.
Yep.
And that was a very roundabout way for me to get there, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I feel you.
And that's why I say the fall to hell is so short, and the journey to heaven is a long skinny road. Is that if it weren't for Jesus paving that way with his blood, right? I mean, the default feels a lot like just straight down.
Yeah. No, I mean, if it weren't for him, we would be sinners in the eyes of the Lord.
Exactly. You know, and I think one of the biggest things that I learned, not just from Daniel chapter 3, and about having that faith and being so persuaded in that faith to just not bow, no matter what the consequences on earth may look like, but that asking forgiveness and praying to not be, I guess, inflated by your position of holding here on earth. You know, like we talk about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego have already been made administrators in Babylon before this
Yeah.
happened, right?
Yeah.
By the same very king that was ready to throw them into the furnace. You know, and they were not inflated by that. At no point during this passage do we see them go, you promoted us to administrator because Daniel interpreted this dream for you. What the heck, dude? You
Yeah.
know,
No,
they just
they
go,
never.
okay, well, this is my God,
Yeah.
and you're not going to change that. So
Hmm.
if that's what you're going to do it. I'm not going to bow. And I think that's something, another small thing to take from this is like, there is no such thing as above. You are never above persecution in any way. You are never above failure in any way. You're never above, you know, trouble or trials and tribulation or being thrown into the furnace just because of some sort of position or how you place yourself in life. There is always going to be something trying to throw you in the furnace.
Yeah.
And this gives us an opportunity to see how that plays out when you have genuine faith.
Yeah. And that just shows how important it is.
So what else you got on this? And close it up for us.
Well, I think the main points we want to take from this, we've kind of touched on them all. Um, Closing it out, just keep the faith, and you won't even smell like smoke when you come out of the fire.
Yeah. That's a good soundbite, brother. Well, that's it for us for Daniel chapter 3, the image of gold in the blazing furnace, and our three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who walked through the fire with an angel and were freed and promoted.
Yeah. Made better for it.
Yep. So until next time, we talked about it. Let us know in the comments if there's anything specific or any specific passage you guys would like to see Cameron and I touch on. Soon I will be having other guests joining in these discussions as well. And God bless and keep walking the path.